I'm Jenny Archard and I'm from Neroche Woodlanders. We are a woodland social enterprise based in the Blackdown Hills, which is in Somerset. So we're just outside the county town of Taunton. We operate from 100 acres of forestry commissioned forest, which you can see behind me, and our aim is to work with nature to fire spirits, kindle communities and foster well-being. So what we do is we work primarily with families and disadvantaged adults. We also do work with a volunteer group who look after the woods and look after other sites. We do a lot of other work with families and groups as we're commissioned by different services, which is why being a social enterprise is really important to us. So being a social enterprise means that we can leverage support from other places that we couldn't if we were a charity or a business. So we're able to trade, we're able to offer services to other organisations. So we offer services to other voluntary and community sector organisations. Our plans for the future. It's a good question, isn't it? Right now, 2020, coming out of lockdown. Our plans for the future actually have stayed pretty much the same. Just more, we just want to do more of what we have been doing. So we want to increase our work with people of disadvantage because we can see that there's going to be an explosion of mental health issues. It was something we were already trying to do. We want to be able to teach people a woodlander's way. We think that we've got some really great tools and techniques. They're very much based on this place that you can see behind me. And we want to expand our reach a little bit as well. So we want to expand our reach to work with more groups and more people and more organisations. But we don't want to grow too big because like the forest, we need to be aware of what our boundaries are.